my part. And I'm now really happy that we do have the three experts with us, who can give us a short introduction in how they think, about how we can organize the data coming from the GATE service. And we want to start actually with you, Daniel. So I give the floor to you. For me, it would be okay if you give your short presentation on your thoughts, and then we can ask you 1 to 2 questions, and then we go on with Tim. The same goes with Tim, and then we go on to Bernhard.
Okay. I'm not sure I prepared well for this, but so I was expecting more interactivity rather than a series of monologues. But I tried to, and I would have had lots of comments on the things that were presented. So I tried to put them into a pad. I just shared the link to the pad. I'll now share my screen that will show you the pad. You can all edit the pad, and I will use that as the basis for some further discussion. And I just started that pad while you were talking after a few slides, and so it's completely hot off the press, not well structured. And oh yeah, and now my kid is coming. I have to open the door just a moment. Maybe Tim can go first because I have to leave the kid in.
And Tim is still eating, but it's okay.
I'm happy to do it. My kids are out the door, so I'm happy to show my ill-prepared self as well. I did I can share my screen. I wrote some thoughts down last night. Julia, is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Hold on. Oh, good, I can share. All right. So, as I've been thinking about this more, I really appreciate the materials beforehand and the walkthrough. Actually, the walkthrough was actually really helpful because it showed the evolution. I didn't really appreciate that until you walked through that. You're absolutely right. Like I see it, you have rich data. It's very qualitative. You're not at all quantitative. In fact, I think lean into that, especially in the early days. So one thing that sticks out to me is, and it's I'll give both what I observed kind of briefly in your sample and just my own anecdote as well, which is those prompts are awesome. The guiding thoughts, sorry, I'll use your language. The guiding thoughts are great. At the same note, they're right. They're heterogeneous. I can use a word. Sometimes we're on the same page. Some of those words have it. You can see it even in the small sample, but most of the time they don't. And I don't see that as a weakness. I see that as a strength. I'll use again from an anecdotal sense. It still occurs now, which is the word replication or reproducibility. Very different context depending on discipline. Discipline itself, talk to an economist. Some of the economists still don't agree with my definition as a experimentalist in the life sciences. And you can hem and haw over that. That's going to take years and years to do. You're trying to create a definition. I think that's not what you're trying to do here. Here you're trying to understand. So it seems like leaning into the qualitative aspect of your data is a real good thing. Say that maybe differently. I wonder how much you want to really not anchor on your guiding thoughts to start and anchor more on what you're getting as the responses to start and let those thematic elements come back out. And again, sometimes you might have matches and sometimes you might end up creating a completely different guiding thought that actually emerges from the data. And then again, there's qualitative, methods. I'm not a qualitative researcher myself. There's tools automated as well that can help you do that. I think that there's a lot of strength into that. And then you can visualize that as well. There's, maps that you can do like affinity mapping. Affinity mapping is, I know, more of a thought exercise, but nonetheless, I think maybe that type of approach could be actually really easy to distill it down and possibly even show a richer network of, well, great, here are the themes, and this is where the themes are drawing from. So that'd be one thought, which is just fully lean into the richness of the qualitative data and let that start to formulate what both are the terms being used as well as the relationships. That was something else that was very interesting in there is that some of the definitions, or sorry, the explanations start to illustrate the person's relationships between them. So if that makes sense, like I think just full on lean into that 100% to start makes a ton of sense to me. The other thing that's there is I'm going to throw it as demographics. Maybe that's not the right word. So there's one thing you talked about, which I think is obviously the right one, which is the relationship to the audience. So I would imagine that's going to vary depending on those. I like the buckets that you had of different ones. So I think trying to understand, depending on how large the data is, what those themes that come out of the explanations, how they relate to those different target audiences is the way I'd think it. So you might find, actually, you might even want to take a big step back and go to each individual group, right? Which is, maybe actually the way trainers talk to policymakers and researchers is identical. I don't think so, by the way, is identical to each other. That's how you nest those types of target audiences together. Versus, I think my guess is you're probably doing it more off of a different logic, which is, this is just what I observe in this space, not the logic of how somebody presents training data to them or training information to them. There's another one that I don't know if you're capturing. I didn't see it, so it's more of an open question for me, which is, it's just as important to know about the trainers themselves. Where are they coming from? Because again, like I'll take my example. I'm a life scientist. If I talk to somebody in economics and I use my word, I need to confirm that that's the word that they would use. And so that means the trainers' backgrounds themselves are actually of something of interest to at least understand if that is making an impact or not. So that would to me be explanation. I don't think I would, for your research question, Julie, I wouldn't present it that way. That's probably confusing. But in terms of understanding, does it matter? And do we need to think about diversity of representation of who's inserting, kind of contributing data? I think that could be of value, only because I think there's dependency between them. So hopefully that makes sense. The other one that's there is, and again, I'm going to suggest something, not at scale for sure. So you're having people connect their content, which is brilliant with DOIs and or at least unique identifiers. I saw the metadata, at least the prompts of you asking for that. I wonder how much it's worth going into that, at least in the beginning, to actually ask the question, that's great, you told me based on these prompts what you have, but let me look at your materials and see if there's anything else there. Now, again, you wouldn't want to be interpreting their information. I think to me, it's more about when I think of most materials, there's usually words in there as well. And so you can start to get even richer data. Not, and again, it's more from the exploration sense of, well, what's really going on when they're trying to explain these certain concepts to a specific audience. I think there's crazy rich data in there. That would require more effort. That means going in there and coding out essentially the content. And it also means now you're no longer asking for the trainers to give their perspective. You're actually yourself and kind of inserting yourself into the data you're collecting. But I wouldn't ignore it. It just seems like in the beginning, at least even if it's just, some type of random sampling strategy, that it could really provide more insights to me, which is really trying to get at like what are the thematic elements that are coming out, and also what are the ones that are not being addressed. So I think your prompt is a good one. Oh, what's not here? I think the real answer to that is in the training data. It's in what they have. They're just not calling it out. That's all. They just don't know what to say. They just know these kind of larger elements. And I guess the last thing I was thinking about, and this was great because I forgot, well, I kind of knew, I guess, but it's great to see it in this presentation, which is right. You started somewhere, right? You had to start somewhere. And you started from a literature review. Great. That's perfect. That's where everyone should start. It seems going back to that could be powerful on a couple different dimensions. One is, yeah, you pulled out what were prompts, guiding thoughts. Obviously, you're getting now richness that'll probably continue to refine what are those true thematic elements that are being done. I'd be curious to know, well, what else is in that kind of what I'm calling thematic space, right? Like, don't forget that literature it's rapidly evolving, as Julia or somebody said it, Marie, somebody, maybe you all said the same thing. It's a rapidly evolving space. So let's not ignore the fact that it's rapidly evolving. The other thing is I wonder, and it might be a little hard to do off the bat, but it might be good to lean into, which is what your goal is. So your goal is to make it so it's accessible back out to different audiences. Part of it is to put it back into relation. So if you're talking to a researcher or a meta research audience, I think one of the questions I'd want to know is, oh, this is great. I wonder what's not being addressed in terms of what the literature is telling us should be addressed, right? Like, so basically, is there a translation gap between what the meta science community is kind of trying to understand are the issues that need education to help step in, but what's not happening, right, in the trainer space? What's the void? So that's a completely different gap that you won't be able to capture in the gate, but you can by tying the data together. Same thing would probably be true in the policy space, I would imagine, in other sectors. So if that makes sense, again, that's starting to go farther, and that might be too much, but the kind of the other data sources are there. And then one last thought I didn't write here, and is on my mind, and your last slide on infrastructure providers, which again, COS does on OSF as we are part of that infrastructure provider space. I don't know if it's possible. I always think of discovery. So part of when I look at this, part of this is trying to untangle discovery, right? So it's one thing to say like, hey, it's open science or open science AI. And so we use these super broad umbrella terms. And when you do that, I think it's fine. People can more or less discover it. But the truth is it's narrower. It's like, okay, well, what aspect of open science are you interested in? And and what audiences are those for? When we think about content getting deposited on repositories like OSF, Zenodo, the closest you can get to that is tags, the metadata. And those tags get stale, and they're probably not the great descriptors. So I wonder if the gate, maybe I'm going too far now, but I wonder if the gate can actually help with this, right? Which is saying, hey, here's a service that's basically allowing us to understand these guiding thoughts and these explanations that help us refine what is that thematic space of open science across different audiences. How do we actually use that to either inform, like push to providers to then figure out, well, how do I help inform these, depositors of this data? Hey, maybe you want to update your metadata. Maybe you want to add new tags to increase the discoverability. Or it does the reverse, right? Maybe it gives you something else to draw from. So that's just another thought. I don't know if that's making sense, but it's reminding me that like, oh, wait, there's a whole different element you've got here, which is discovery. And not discovery at a global level, discovery at even the individual content. It was in the video described that as well, right? That the use case of I'm a trainer and I want to update my content. Part of it would be like, well, how do I connect back? Like, how do I understand what else to pull from? Because I might be using different terminology even. So just another thought that's more of application, not research. I will stop. I'm sorry, I'm stuffed up, so I'm probably sounding a little foggy. So apologies there.
No, thank you very much. Okay, let's open the floor for one or two questions to Tim before we then proceed. And yes, so all of you who are on their laptops, you can join Daniel when you follow the chat to his page, and then we can add information there too. However, Daniel, I want to tell you, somebody here in the room is also working, but we will combine it at the end, okay? So we have all the information together. Okay, let's start with the questions. Who has a question?
Well, I could.
Yeah. You go.
Well, thanks a lot, Tim. I think that was really interesting. And some of the stuff you brought up, we have already been discussing as well. So when it comes to going back to the literature, but I really like this idea that when you said, okay, maybe there's an entirely new gap that we're not seeing at the moment. So yeah, we have started with a lit review, and then we came up with the list that we're now presenting, that we're now checking. But what's missing in between? So what is something that we might not be seeing? I'm just asking myself, how often do we need to play this game? I mean, it also is we were talking about the game as a constant knowledge exchange. And basically, we have to establish, when I follow you right, another knowledge exchange that we are doing ourselves all the time, constantly, to update and to not miss something and to make these gaps visible. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what I was trying to convey. Yeah, I don't, how often? I have no idea how often, right? I mean, the literature moves, all of this moves so fast. So I
It
think
does.
part of it is a practical question. How often can one do it?
Mhm.
And then it can shift into the other practical question, which is how often does one need to do it? So I think of what if that doesn't make sense. Like it's like longitudinal surveys, right? Like we're doing some ourselves. We're like, do you really need to do it every year? Probably not. Like it's a question of whether you are seeing differences in what you're trying to measure. Part of it's practical. Can I afford to do it? Do I get that enough responses? So I think you're right, which is it's not clear to me yet how often. I think part of this is to recognize like, right, here we do, if you get the right prompts, if you get the right like elements to look for, there is tons of great methodology to go and continue to do systematic reviews, right? You can keep doing that. So that's the beauty is you just tap into it. The trick to tap into it is, well, what are you going to ask, right? Because the open science umbrella is just too big.
Mm.
It's just such a open scholarship. It's just catchwords right now. It's just like AI is a catchword. So you are right. You're picking up what I was trying to get at, which is you're right. There's probably a gap here how to do it. It's interesting to think about this too. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with this was a while back. I don't think they've done anything with it. There's a whole nother strategy people can go about doing this, right? The National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Math in the US did this, which is we will tell you the definition. We get experts and we tell you what to use and we just push it down into the system. And that can work. It does work to an extent, but it's problematic, right? It's like, yo, you're forcing. It's like, oh, we're all going to speak English now. Sorry, that's what we're doing because of me, probably, right? But that doesn't work, right? Like what the gate seems to be doing is the opposite. Well, what's happening organically? So Fort tried to do this as well for open science. They call it open science terms. They made an open science dictionary, and you can look if you look on Fort's site. I can send you the link if you want, if you're not familiar with it. It tried to do the force down approach. I think that's actually what is both a good thing. So it's a resource here to use, but it's a problematic thing because it's creating definitions that you're forcing on people, and it doesn't mean it's going to work. At the same note, this does give you the information, low-hanging fruit of here's some gaps. Great. Here are definitions people are trying to advance. Clearly, they're basing it on something, right? The literature, their experiences, who they are, their fields, right? Location, all that stuff. So I think you're right. That creates that window, which is, what's not happening? Why are we not capturing in the gate? And you're not going to be able to untangle it entirely. It could be that, oh, you just haven't captured those trainers. They just haven't deposited the data. It does exist. Or it could be, no, it's just not being translated. Nobody's doing it, right? People are talking about it and writing about it, and nobody's actually implementing it. And I think that one's the really exciting one to think about trying to tap into.
Okay, is there another question? Oh, Marie.
Yes, Tim, just a comment. What do you think about this community-based approach instead of having experts sitting in an advisory board solely and knowing everything and opposing their knowledge on the community, saying these are the recommendations? We are doing this as well, but the first step is to collect empirical data from the community. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so this I think is the part that if you can figure out how to present that diversity, that richness, right? I'm gonna use that word richness. It sounds a lot nicer because that's really what's going on. If you can figure out how to present the richness, I think that's way more informative because it allows the natural evolution to occur. So I think like language does this, right? I always love hearing like what's the new word that's coming out, right? And language continues to evolve, right? New words pop up and get incorporated. There's no way I think any top-down stakeholder approach will ever be able to stay up with that. That's not what they're trying to do. So, but there is a balancing act, right? And I know this, like especially when you think about the policy connection and how to communicate this out to the general public. These are way too many words, way too complex. We've got to distill it down to a single tight language, right? That a policymaker can use that has broad applicability. So there is this balancing act, right? Between, we do need to have uniform word use and knowledge so that way we understand what's happening, right? Open science itself, I think, has gotten to the point where little struggle, right? Scholarship versus science. But more or less now as people get it, they're accepting of that term. So I'm a bigger fan of like leaning into the gate being not a here's top down what we're doing and I'll tell you what happens. I like the idea of like, it'll help inform what that maybe will be, but it's really constantly listening to the community, which is what's on the ground, what are the words, what are the topics, and what are the gaps that are not being addressed. I think that's way more informative because like I said, it's like you're constantly evolving. I don't know of anyone else that's trying to get at that outside of just that classic, like, I'll write a paper and somebody will discover my paper, and that's how it naturally finds its way into the community. So I don't know if that makes sense, but my perspective is that's a strength to lean into. It just means though, real quick, it means that then that you can't do the other. You can't pretend that the gate is sitting here saying, here's the definitions. I think it's instead saying, here's what we're observing and the relationships. And so it's going to have to probably take a stance on the report, which is what side of that coin you're gonna lean on.
Okay. Thank you. So